I spent the next few days trying to rebuild some semblance of normalcy, but everything felt different now. It was like I'd been yanked out of the life I knew and thrust into something entirely foreign, yet strangely freeing. I worked with Jim to finalize the paperwork for the divorce, and he assured me things would be swift, given the mountain of evidence I had on Jessica. I hadn't heard from Jessica since that night, which was a relief, but I knew she'd resurface when she realized just how serious I was. I spent most of my time at the office, throwing myself into work to avoid thinking about what was happening. I wasn't sleeping much, but at least keeping busy helped numb the pain. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office, reviewing some reports, when my phone buzzed. It was Christine. I hadn't spoken to her since the banquet, and I had no idea what to expect. We were both in the same boat now, betrayed, humiliated, and trying to figure out what came next. I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Hey, Christine, how are you holding up?" There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear her take a deep breath before responding. "I'm doing okay, I guess. I filed for divorce this morning." "I'm sorry," I said, genuinely feeling for her. "I know it's hard." "Yeah," she sighed. "It is. But honestly, I think it's for the best. I can't stay married to someone like Steve, not after everything." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I get it. Same here with Jessica. I filed too." Christine was silent for a moment, then she said something I didn't expect. "Michael, I don't know if this is weird or not, but would you want to grab a drink sometime? I think we could both use someone to talk to." I hesitated. Was it too soon? Too messy? But then I realized I could use the company, especially from someone who understood what I was going through. Besides, Christine wasn't asking for anything more than a drink. Just two people who had been screwed over, looking for some solace. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I think I could use that." We made plans to meet at a quiet bar downtown later that evening. As I drove there, I kept thinking about how strange it was, sitting down for drinks with the wife of the man who had wrecked my life. But Christine wasn't the enemy. She was a victim of Steve's deceit, just like I was of Jessica's. Maybe we could help each other through this mess. When I arrived, Christine was already there, sitting at a corner table with a glass of wine in front of her. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days, but there was a certain strength in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, thanks for coming." We sat there for a while, talking about everything but Steve and Jessica at first. It was nice to just have a normal conversation, to remember that there was still life outside of the chaos. We talked about our jobs, our favorite places in the city, even the latest movies we'd seen. But eventually, the conversation circled back to the inevitable. "So," Christine said, swirling her wine glass, "what do you think happens next? With all of this?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Honestly, I don't know. I'm trying to take it one step at a time. I've got Jim handling the divorce, and I'm working on dissolving the business partnership with Steve. But beyond that, it's hard to say." Christine nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I'm in the same boat. I don't know what life looks like after this, but I guess we'll figure it out." There was a pause, the weight of everything we'd been through settling over us like a heavy cloud. Then Christine looked at me, her eyes searching mine. Do you think we'll ever get past this? The betrayal, I mean?" I didn't have an answer. How do you move on from something like that? How do you trust anyone again after the people closest to you ripped your heart out and stomped on it? But I knew we had to try. "I think we will," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. "It'll take time, but we'll get through it." Christine nodded, her eyes softening a bit. "Yeah, maybe we will." The rest of the evening passed by in a blur of conversation and quiet moments. By the time we left, I felt lighter, like I'd shed some of the weight I'd been carrying since that night. Christine and I hugged before parting ways, and as I drove home, I realized something. I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me, people who would help me pick up the pieces. But just as I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number, but I recognized the tone immediately. It was Jessica. "Jessica, Michael, we need to talk. I've made a mistake." I stared at the screen, my heart thudding in my chest. A mistake? After everything she put me through, she thought she could just waltz back into my life and call it a mistake? Not a chance. I shoved my phone back into my pocket, not bothering to reply. Jessica had made her bed. Now, she could lie in it. That text from Jessica lingered in my mind for the next few days, no matter how hard I tried to push it out. The nerve of her, to call it a mistake, like she'd accidentally ordered the wrong coffee. But the more I thought about it, the more it became clear. Jessica wasn't used to consequences. She never thought her actions through because, in her mind, everything could always be smoothed over later. But not this time. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about what she would try next. Would she show up at my house? At my office? The anxiety was gnawing at me. I needed to get ahead of whatever her plan was. So, I called Jim to let him know about the text and asked him to speed up the divorce proceedings. "Michael, I'm already on it," Jim said with his usual calm efficiency. "But here's a word of advice. If she contacts you again, don't respond. Any communication should go through me. We don't want her trying to manipulate you into doing something you'll regret." "Yeah," I muttered, staring out the window. "Thanks, Jim." I hung up, feeling a little more in control but still rattled. I wasn't going to let Jessica pull me back into her drama. That part of my life was over. The next day, I was sitting in my office, trying to focus on work, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Michael, Jessica's here. She says she needs to talk to you." My stomach clenched. Of course, she had the audacity to show up at my workplace. I should have known. "Tell her I'm busy," I said without looking up from my computer screen. She said it's urgent. "I don't care," I snapped, the irritation bubbling up before I could stop it. My assistant, Laura, looked taken aback, but she nodded and left the room. I leaned back in my chair, trying to calm myself down. Jessica wasn't going to ruin my day, not again. But when Laura came back a few minutes later, she had a different expression on her face, something like concern mixed with confusion. "Michael, she's not leaving." I cursed under my breath. This was typical Jessica, refusing to take no for an answer, determined to force her way back into my life. I slammed my laptop shut and stood up. "Fine, I'll deal with it." I walked out to the reception area, and there she was, Jessica, sitting in one of the chairs, looking every bit as put together as she always did. Her hair was perfect, her outfit immaculate, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of desperation that hadn't been there before. "Michael," she said, standing up when she saw me. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Jess?" She took a deep breath, glancing around the room like she was embarrassed to be having this conversation in public. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "No," I said firmly. "You can say whatever you need to say right here." She looked at me, her eyes wide, and for a split second, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. Real, genuine fear. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not after everything. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I made a mistake, Michael. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't want to lose you." I blinked, not sure I was hearing her right. Was she serious? After all that, now she was having a change of heart? "Too late for that," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choice." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a second, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered her texts, her smug smile as she walked out with Steve, the way she had flaunted it all in front of me. "I know I messed up," she whispered. "But Steve's not who I thought he was. He's been seeing someone else. I don't know how I didn't see it before." I snorted. "Oh, so now you want to come crawling back because your little fling didn't work out? That's rich, Jess." She winced, but I didn't care. She deserved it. All of it. "Michael, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make this right. Just give me a chance." I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her to get out of my life for good. But another part of me, the part that had spent 10 years building a life with her, wanted to hear her out, wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, this could be fixed. but I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not anymore. I can't do this, Jessica, I said, my voice steady, even though my hands were trembling. It's over. You need to accept that. She looked at me, her face crumbling, and for a moment, I thought she might actually break down. But then she straightened up, wiping the tears from her eyes, and her expression hardened. Fine, she said, her voice cold now. But don't think for a second this is over, Michael. You'll regret this. I didn't respond. I just watched as she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the office, leaving me standing there, feeling like I'd just been hit by a truck. Laura, who had been sitting at her desk trying not to eavesdrop, looked up at me, her eyes wide. You okay, Michael? I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. Yeah, I'm fine. But as I walked back to my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica's parting words weren't just an empty threat. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was exhausted. Dealing with the fallout from Jessica and Steve had drained every ounce of energy I had left. Christine had texted me a few times to check in, and I appreciated it. She was one of the few people who understood exactly what I was going through. But I hadn't heard from Steve. Not since that night when I'd knocked him flat on my porch. I knew it was only a matter of time before he tried to strike back, though. Steve wasn't the kind of guy to let things go. Sure enough, that Saturday evening, just as I was starting to relax with a glass of bourbon in my hand, my phone buzzed again. It was a notification from the bank, an alert about an attempted withdrawal from my business account. A large one. I shot up from the couch, heart racing. What the hell was going on? I immediately called the bank, and after a frustratingly long series of hold music, I finally got through to someone. Mr. Reynolds, the banker said, sounding concerned. We received an authorization request for a transfer of $50,000 from your business account to an offshore account. We flagged it because the request didn't match your typical transaction pattern. My blood ran cold. Steve. It had to be him. He was trying to clean me out. No, that wasn't authorized, I said, my voice tight. Cancel it immediately. Of course, the banker said. We'll reverse the transaction and freeze the account until further notice. I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. Steve wasn't just trying to destroy my personal life. He was coming for my business, too. This wasn't over, like I'd thought. It was just beginning. I needed to stop him before he did any more damage. Grabbing my phone, I dialed Jim's number. Jim, I said the moment he picked up. We've got a problem. Steve just tried to pull $50,000 from the business account. There was a pause, then a low whistle on the other end. That son of a bitch. All right, Michael, I'm on it. I'll contact the bank and make sure everything's locked down tight. We can also file an injunction to prevent him from accessing any business funds until this is resolved. Thanks, Jim, I said, feeling a surge of relief. I don't know what I'd do without you. Jim chuckled. That's what I'm here for. Don't worry, Michael. We'll get him. Legally, Steve's on very shaky ground here. He's got no right to those funds. After hanging up with Jim, I sat back on the couch, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I'd underestimated Steve. I'd thought he would slink off into the shadows after our confrontation, but he wasn't done. He was coming for me with everything he had, but I wasn't going to let him win. Not now. Not ever. Sunday came and went in a haze of phone calls with Jim and meetings with the bank. Steve had tried to wipe me out, but we managed to catch it in time. Jim assured me that the legal action we'd taken would make it nearly impossible for Steve to pull another stunt like that, but I knew him. He wasn't the type to back down after one failed attempt. He'd keep coming until there was nothing left to take. The real question was, what would Jessica do? After that confrontation at my office, I hadn't heard from her, but her parting words, "You'll regret this," still echoed in my mind. If Steve was willing to play dirty, I had no doubt Jessica was too. Monday morning, I was back at the office, buried in paperwork, when Laura knocked on my door again. This time, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Michael, you need to see this." She handed me her phone, and my stomach sank the moment I saw what was on the screen. There, on the local news website, was a story about me. But it wasn't about my career or the award I'd received. It was about my so-called affair. Local business leader's marriage scandal, Infidelity rumors and business turmoil. The article detailed Jessica's version of events, painting me as the cheating husband, the unfaithful partner who had driven her into Steve's arms. It even claimed that I had emotionally abandoned her, forcing her to seek comfort elsewhere. The entire thing was riddled with lies, but that didn't matter. It was out there now, for everyone to see. I felt my pulse quicken, a wave of nausea rolling over me. This was it. Jessica's revenge. She knew how much I valued my reputation in the community, and now she was trying to destroy it, just like she had tried to destroy our marriage. I slammed the phone down on my desk, my mind racing. If this story got traction, it could ruin everything, not just my personal life, but my business too. Who would want to work with someone involved in a scandal like this? I needed to act fast. Get Jim on the phone, I told Laura, barely keeping my voice steady. Tell him we need to issue a statement now. Laura nodded, rushing out of the room as I collapsed into my chair, rubbing my temples. Jessica had taken it too far. She could play her games with Steve all she wanted, but dragging my name through the mud like this? That was a line she shouldn't have crossed. A few minutes later, Jim was on the line. Michael, I saw the article, he said, his voice calm but serious. This is bad, but we can handle it. First things first, we need to issue a public statement refuting the claims. Do you have proof of Jessica's affair? I've got the voicemails, I said, feeling a glimmer of hope. The one she left me over the weekend. Perfect, Jim said. We'll draft a statement that cites those messages as proof of her infidelity. We'll keep it clean, but direct. This isn't just about your personal reputation anymore. This could impact the business, so we need to be swift and thorough. For the next hour, Jim and I worked together on the statement. He advised me to keep it factual and not to engage with the more salacious details. We simply needed to set the record straight. Once the statement was ready, we released it to the local press and posted it on my company's website. I also sent it to key clients and colleagues, just to get ahead of any rumors that might spread. The rest of the day was tense. I couldn't focus on anything, just waiting for the fallout. But something unexpected happened. Around noon, I received a call from Christine. Michael, she said, her voice shaky. I just saw the article. I can't believe Jessica did this. Yeah, well, that's Jessica for you, I muttered. She's trying to destroy me. Christine was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that caught me off guard. I think I can help. How? I asked, genuinely curious. What could Christine possibly do to stop this train wreck? I've got proof, she said, her voice firmer now. Steve's been sleeping around for years, not just with Jessica. I've kept records, texts, emails, photos. If we go public with it, it'll blow their whole story apart. No one will believe a word they say. I blinked, processing what she was offering. Christine had the evidence to turn this entire situation on its head. If we could show that Steve was a serial cheater, it would destroy their credibility and take the heat off of me. But going public with something like that? It could get messy. Are you sure about this? I asked. It's a big step, Christine. You'll be putting yourself in the spotlight. I know, she said quietly, but I'm done letting Steve walk all over me. He's ruined enough lives. It's time he faced the consequences. I paused, thinking it over. Christine had been through hell just like I had, and now she was offering to put herself on the line to help me. It wasn't an easy decision, but deep down, I knew it was the right one. All right, I said, my voice steady. Let's do it. The next day, Christine went public with her evidence. It didn't take long for the story to spread like wildfire. The emails, the texts, it was all out there now. Steve's years of infidelity were plastered across every local news site, and suddenly, the focus shifted. No longer was the narrative about my supposed affair. It was about Steve, the serial cheater, and Jessica, the woman who had gotten involved with him. Jessica and Steve's plan to destroy me had backfired in spectacular fashion. I didn't hear from either of them after that. Not a call, not a text, nothing. But I knew they were watching as their lives fell apart. The business partnership with Steve dissolved quickly after that, with Jim negotiating a clean break that left me with the majority of the company's assets. Steve didn't have much fight left in him once his reputation was in tatters. As for Jessica, I found out through mutual friends that she had left town, apparently too embarrassed to face the fallout. I didn't care where she went. All I knew was that she was out of my life for good. The divorce went through smoothly, thanks to the prenup and the overwhelming evidence in my favor. In the end, Jessica walked away with nothing, just as I'd promised her. And while there was still a lot of healing to do, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. Christine and I kept in touch after that. We weren't in a rush to move on from our respective marriages, but we'd found comfort in each other's company, knowing we'd both come out the other side stronger. We met up for drinks a few more times, and slowly, I started to feel like my old self again. One night, a few months later, Christine and I sat at the same bar where we'd had our first drink together after the banquet. We didn't talk about Steve or Jessica anymore. Instead, we talked about the future, what we wanted, where we were headed. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope. "I'm glad we got through this," I said, raising my glass to hers. She smiled, clinking her glass against mine. "Me too, Michael. Here's to starting over." And as we sat there, sharing a quiet moment in the aftermath of all the chaos, I realized something. I hadn't just survived Jessica and Steve's betrayal. I'd come out stronger. And for the first time in months, I was ready to move forward.